All right. Here we are. Frank Bertay. Come over here.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's going to tell us his life story.
Okay, well, I was born on June 19th, 1941, in Manhattanville Hospital in Manhattan, New York City. I don't remember my first year at all, but I know that on my second year, my family moved to 3467 Eastchester Road in the Bronx, and we lived in apartment 5E. And I don't remember too much of my young life, but when I was 2 years old, I know I had a tricycle and I used to ride around in the living room. We only had a 3-room apartment. We had a kitchen, we had a living room, and we had a bedroom, and of course a bathroom. And I used to ride around in circles in my room. I remember that. And then when I was about 3 years old, so my father was drafted into the Army for the Second World War. And I remember him always going, when he used to have to leave to go to training camp and doing everything like that, he used to go down in the elevator from the 4th floor. He used to wave through the little window and go downstairs. And he would go off to Fort Bragg and Fort Sill, places like that. And I didn't know too much about it, but when he was come home, I was always happy. And then when he finally came home from the war in 1944, 1945, when the war was over, he brought me a fire engine. It was made out of wood, and it had a couple little figures that were made out of dowel sticks. And they were the firemen. They could put them in little holes on the fire engine. I remember that. And then I had a lot of fun and things. And then the things I remember are mostly after I got to be like 5 or 6 years old. And I always wanted to build stuff. And our apartment was really small, as I mentioned. But we had a couple of small closets and one big closet when you come in the front door. And it was about 5 feet deep and maybe 4 feet wide. And we used to keep all our coats in there. But I always loved building stuff. And my father and mother let me have half the closet for my shop. So I built a workbench probably when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I made it with wood, oak flooring for the top of the workbench. I had my tools up on the wall, and I always wanted tools. I love tools. And around the time 1946, 47, we used to go visit my grandfather, who lived in Brooklyn. And my father told me stories about him that when he was 12 years old, he left his home in Sicily, and he became a cabin boy on a square rigger. And he went around the world a number of times, and eventually came back to Sicily. And then he evidently had a brother, which I don't know his name, but when they were in the maybe 20s, he got married, and then he went to Argentina, and they had a construction company there. And then after that, there was a war, and they stayed in Argentina for a while, and then eventually my grandfather left Argentina and went to New York City, and he gave his construction company to his brother there. And the reason they left was because my grandmother had 2 children in Argentina, but they didn't last past 1 year old. They died from different diseases. And she said, I don't want to have any more babies in this country. I want to go someplace where the babies will be safe. And so they went to, I think they went back to Sicily first. And then my father was there, and my Uncle Frank was there. And then during the war, they had a house that was right near, it was built on the outside of a castle wall. I think it was Milazzo, Sicily. And my grandfather told her during the war, hey, if you don't have any money, sell the house. And she sold it for almost nothing. And they were very, very poor. My father said that him and his brother and the mother would have like 2 pieces of bread, and they'd pretend one piece of bread was cheese and the other was bread, and they would eat one piece and the other piece trying to survive. And they did, and then eventually he moved them to Brooklyn, New York City, and my grandfather became a bricklayer. And while he was there, he always loved boats. He joined a club at Prospect Park Lake, and he built boats. First he built some model boats, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, Columbus's boats, you know, just small models. And they were really beautiful, and he donated them to the club where he used to take out his model sailboat, and they stayed there for many years, and then they were stolen. And then he decided to join the races. They used to race model sailboats that were like 6 feet long, and he made the boats, and they were beautiful. The deck was beautiful. The shape of the hulls were beautiful. My grandmother sewed all the sails for it and did a fantastic job. And they didn't have remote control, so they would put the boat out, and then they would chase it with a small canoe, which my grandfather also made. And they would chase it, and they would see which one would win, or like a race on a certain tack. And he was really good, so he designed the boat based on looking at all the other boats and which the good points were and the bad points. He used to win a lot of races. Anyway, in 1947 or so, he died. And I told my father I wanted that boat. And he said he couldn't have it because our apartment was too small. So after that, I started getting interested in boats. And the first thing I tried to do was make the ribs of a boat out of clothespins. I would split them and try to nail them together, try to make the ribs and the keel of the boat. And it wasn't very successful. And I continued trying, and I made a couple of different models. And eventually, when I got up to being maybe 10 or 11, 12 years old, I decided I discovered balsa wood, and I was able to get nice pieces of balsa wood that were all finished, 1/4 inch square beams, and 1/8 of an inch by 1/4 inch, and all sorts of stuff. And so I made the ribs of the boat out of balsa wood, and I made the planking of the boat, and I needed straight pins to hold the ribs together the planks together while they were being glued. And I used to go throughout our apartment building. We lived on the 4th floor. I would ask people for straight pins. And eventually I finished the boat. And then I wanted to sail the boat. And then I needed lead to weigh it down for ballast. And my father had some lead sinkers that he used to use when he was fishing. And I melted those down, and I made the lead keel for the ballast. And then my father took me out to City Island, which is an island off the coast of the Bronx. We rented a rowboat. We put the boat in the water. It was called the Buccaneer. And we had it sailing out there. We were chasing it with the rowboat. And it was very interesting because the thing, I just let it go. I didn't have a string on it or anything. And it sailed underneath the City Island Bridge. And there was a lot of boat traffic underneath that bridge. And there was like cabin cruises that were going by and just staring at this little boat sailing underneath the bridge right near them. That was a high point. I loved that. And then when I got back home, I put some tubes in it, and we used to put fireworks inside the tubes and like pebbles or other stuff inside, and I could set off the fireworks and shoot out of the side of the boat like cannons. That was a lot of fun. And that boat still exists. And then as I get older, like I was probably 8, 9 years old, I remember finding a book somebody had thrown out. It was on electrical engineering. And I looked at it and really didn't understand very much of it. But I said, I'm going to become an engineer. I just knew it from that age. And as I went on, my shop got better. I finally got a fluorescent light inside my closet with my workbench. And I was building stuff all the time. And then eventually I went to high school, and I enjoyed that, but I didn't spend as much time studying. I used to work first on all my boat projects and other things that I was building. I also built some furniture. I built hi-fi cabinets for my father. I built a coffee table for my father. I made a whole bunch of furniture in the house because I just love building things. And
What about the Canon?
Oh, yeah. And then when I was in high school, I was taking, they call it academic course or like a technical course. The technical course was for people who were going to become like, plumbers or carpenters, things like this. I took the academic course because I wanted to go to college. But we did have course, and they let us take like 1 year of shop. And I saw the kids that were in shop for more years. I only got 1 year, and they were building cannons, and they were making cannons out of brass rods. They were about 1.5 inches in diameter, or maybe, you know, 1 foot long. But they had big metal lathes that they could carve the cannons out of. So I decided I wanted to do that, but they wouldn't let me do it because I only had a year and I only made a couple of little wooden projects. So I decided to build a lathe out of wood. And I built this lathe out of wood, and I had a motor at one end, and I had something to hold the rod at the other end. They call it tailstock. And then what I did is I just took metal files and spent hours and hours filing on this cannon, so the rod, the solid bar, so that it would form a cannon shape. It was very nice. It had a little bulb at the end, like naval cannons had, and I really enjoyed making it. And then I made wheels for it, and like a naval cannon with the base of it, and all this stuff. And we actually took it up one day. I had a friend of mine who lived in the building, and he had a shop with a place where he worked, and he drilled out a hole. The other guys that built the cannons, they wouldn't let him put a hole in it at the shop in school because they didn't want anybody to get hurt. But this guy was nice. He drilled a 1/2 inch hole down the middle of it. We put a hole in the end, and actually filled it up with match heads, and broke a couple of match heads in half to put it in the place where the fuse would go. And we were going to set it off, and I was going to shoot it off in the hallway. But then at the end, I decided, all right, let's go up on the roof. So we had a roof with like a brick fence around it so you couldn't fall off. And I set it up, and I put an empty shell in it from the casing of like a rifle bullet. It didn't have any point on it, just a hollow shell. I put it in. I aimed it at one of the vent pipes coming up out of the roof. We had vent pipes for the drainage. And I lit it, and I just waited, and the fire went down the hole. It took seemed like a minute or something, but eventually it was this tremendous explosion. And the cannon jumped back. And right in front of the cannon was the shell, but it looked like it got hit by a sledgehammer. And when I picked it up, I tried to put it back in the hole, but it was flattened, and it was flattened like in a curve. So I noticed that there was a scar on this big pipe that I aimed at. Evidently, the shell went out, it wrapped itself around the pipe, flattened out, and came right back at the cannon. Good thing it didn't kill anybody on the way back. And then a whole bunch of people rushed up to the roof and said, what happened? What happened? Oh, nothing, we're just fooling around. They didn't give us any trouble. Thank goodness we didn't do it inside the hallway. So that was fun. And then I just really enjoyed that stuff. And I continued working on like boat designs and this and that. And then I was in high school at this time, and I really loved engineering and science and everything. And so instead of taking physics, which is a senior course, I took it in my second year. And I said, I just want to take it. They said, okay. So I took it. And I passed it. With all the seniors, I passed it as a sophomore. And then I decided I wanted to take a drafting course, which wasn't in my curriculum. I was supposed to be academic, like English, math, physics. And so I took this drafting course, and I took the first course of it, and that was like a 3-year course. And I told the professor, the next course I want to take is I want to take the final course in drafting. So I said, okay. So I took like, the 6th course in drafting. And he had like little projects for us to draw and this and that. And he had a closet full of old machine parts and stuff. And I said, I want to get those machine parts and draft them up into, drawings of front view, side view, top view. So he said, okay. So I did one little pipe thing. And I think the second thing I did, I decided to do a crankshaft from a car. So I got the crankshaft, and the professor let me take it home with me. So I carried it home on my shoulder. We were about, 2 miles away from home. And one of my friends had a little money. He says, Frank, come on, I'll take you home in a cab. So I brought it home. I worked on it every Saturday. It took me a couple of weeks, and I finally got the whole thing drawn up. Brought the crankshaft back. I did really good in that. But that was really valuable because I love mechanical drawing, and you need it for engineering. And then when I was a senior, I had been taking all these math courses, all the math I could possibly take. I wanted to go into the calculus course, which was the first time they offered calculus courses in high school, and the professor there was offering it. And so I came into the class and said, I want to take this calculus course. He says, what are you doing here? I said, I want to take it. So I said, all right. So he let me take the course. And I did pretty darn good, because usually I had people that got all A's and all this stuff. I didn't get all A's. I always had like 75 average or something in high school. But I passed it. I did better than some of those kids that were brains. And then I got out of high school, and then I was trying to get into a four-year college, city college. I couldn't get in because I only had a 74 average, and you needed like an 85 average to get in. So I went to Bronx Community College. And the college was previously, it was previously a public school. And it had like elementary school, it had little drawings, kids were drawing in the second grade, third grade. And anyway, they put us in this school, and it was like 100 kids in my engineering class. And I went through the course, and I decided I wasn't going to build any projects during school year. I was only going to build projects when I was at Christmas and summertime. So I went through that, and I really worked hard, and I did, thank God, I did very well. So when I got out, I graduated from there after 2 years. I got the engineering award. I was first in my class. I also got the math award because I did very good in mathematics. And then I was able to get into the four-year college, which was City College. And then I went to City College, and I went in for mechanical engineering, and I was there for like 3 years. And during that time, in the summertime, my father says, why don't you get a job? So he took me to the northern Bronx, where there was all these junkyards and industrial stuff. And he left me off, and he says, here, go get a job. So I walked up to this place. It was a place where they made tanks. It was called Lindy Hydrothermal Products. They made heat exchangers. So first I went around to the back, and the guy was making a big oil storage tank. And they had these big rollers, and they'd make like a 6-foot diameter tank. And I talked to the guy there. I said, look, I'm taking engineering. I like to work here. And he says, well, tell him you're a friend of mine, and then go see if you can get a job. So I said, okay. So I went inside. I says, I know this guy, and I'd like to get a job as an engineer here. So they said, okay, you can be a draftsman, because I had all those drafting courses. So I worked there for about, I don't know, like a month or so, and the chief engineer there had myself as a draftsman and another guy as a draftsman. And the chief engineer was a BS artist, and he didn't understand anything about engineering. He was using a book from like 1800 to design heat exchangers. And there was a lot of progress between 1800 and 1958. So when I had taken heat transfer courses, I knew all that stuff. So he left, and they told me, Frank, you've got to go because we don't need a draftsman, we need a chief engineer. I told him, give me a week, I'll be chief engineer. He says, okay. So I started designing all these heat exchanger things, and then we had to put out a catalog. And we used this technology called Nomograph at that time, where you make some graphs. And I had secretaries working on it, I had the other draftsmen working on it, and we were able to size all the heat exchangers for the catalog. And it worked out great. So then I said, I was only making $70 a week. So after a couple of weeks, I said, hey, look, that guy was making a couple of hundred, I'm making 70. I want a raise. So they said, well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. So I said, come on, I want a raise. So they said, all right, we'll hire you back. So they gave me $80 a week. So then I worked another couple of weeks and went back to school. And they were still in trouble the next summer, so I worked it again. But I had some money. So then I decided I was going to build a boat in my bedroom on the 4th floor. And at this time, we moved into a different apartment on 4E instead of 5D, I think it was 4E. And I had my own room. So I built a really big workbench with all my tools. And then I built two parallelograms, which would be over my bed, which I built, which held this 12-foot long boat. And then when I wanted to work on it, the parallelograms would come down and put it in the middle of the room, and I could work on it. Now, in order to build a boat, I had to make ribs, I have to make the siding, I have to do the keel, all this stuff. So I told my parents, look, I want to build this boat, and I need to run some long planks through the living room. They said, okay. So I put up like a saw in the middle of the living room. I took these 12-foot long planks of half-inch thick oak, and I ran it through the saw into the bedroom, and I made small, like 1.5-inch wide pieces of wood, which I made all the ribs out. And then I also got silicon bronze bolts for it from the place where I was working. I bought that, and I made all the ribs. I made the keel, and then I decided to cover it up. Instead of doing planking, I decided to make multi-layer, like a plywood that was molded to the surface of the sides of the boat, and it had a nice shape to it. And so I put one layer on, and I glued it on. I had thumbtacks, then I put all glue, then I put a second layer. Put 3 layers, so I got the whole thing done. And I decided, because I had been reading books about boats like Kon-Tiki, which is like about catamarans by Thor Heyerdahl. He had a raft, and then I read Ruby Choi, did about catamarans. Really fascinating. So I decided to make a trimarine. And I don't think anybody invented a trimarine at that time. They had proas, which had an outrigger on one side, but I designed something that had 2 outriggers, one on either side, made it a trimarine. And I worked on it, and it stayed over my bed, and then pretty soon I graduated and went to MIT, and it stayed over my bed unfinished for many years. And then I went to MIT, and I went in there for nuclear engineering, and I was there for like 7 years. I got my master's degree, my nuclear engineer's degree, and my PhD. And while I was there, I still loved to build things. So when I got married, I was there 7 years, after about maybe 4 or 5 years, I got married to Phyllis Berthet, my wife. And we decided to get a 1-room married students' apartments. And one room.
You're the first ones to get married in the chapel.
Oh yeah, we were the first ones to get married in the MIT chapel, because we used to go daily mass. The priest knew me. When I asked him if I could get married there, he said okay. So we got married in the chapel.
And how'd you meet Mom?
I met Mom in the library at MIT, because I used to go there from 7 o'clock in the morning, go all my classes until 11 o'clock at night. And she just happened to work in the library. She was pushing books around and putting them back on the shelves. And I just was attracted to her. So once in a while, she'd leave a cart of books around someplace. And when she wasn't looking, or she went around the corner, I would take the cart and hide it on her. And then she'd be looking around trying to find the cart. And then eventually we started talking and all this stuff. And then eventually I started walking her home. And then we said we were just platonic relationship, or just intellectual. And then eventually, I decided, hey, this is the girl for me. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we were going to get married. And that was like in the summertime. And then we were joking around, we get married for Halloween. And then she says, no, we can't get married for Halloween. So we said Thanksgiving. Then we said Christmas. And then we said, no, we'll do it the next June. So we got married like a year after I proposed to her. And it was a wonderful time, because I was able to do like these things. I proposed to her like in July or something, and her birthday was coming up on the 21st of August. So I decided, and she was always on a diet, I decided to make her a birthday cake, something like a birthday cake. And I made it in the lab. I made it out of cardboard, actually. And it was about 2 feet high, about 1.5 feet in diameter. It was a heart shape. I put all kinds of stuff around it, decorations, and then she was always on this diet. So I put in the bottom of the central hole in it, I put a little box of chocolates. Then I filled it up with grapefruit, because that was like a grapefruit diet. Then on top of that, I put a little blue bear and some flowers. And then I wanted to bring it to her house for her birthday. So I got one of these lab carts, and I took it from MIT. It was like a mile or so to her house. And I had this thing on top of the cart, and I pushed it all the way to her house. When she saw it, she thought it was all full of candy. She thought it was her birthday. And she saw the bear, oh beautiful. She saw the flowers, oh beautiful. Then she saw the grapefruit. She said, oh no, grapefruit? What's this? I said, keep looking, keep looking. And then she found the chocolate. She was very happy. We had a lot of fun. I used to I used to walk her home every night, you know, from work, and then I used to share my dinner with her every evening because she didn't have much money or anything, and I would take her to dinner. I'd split my dinner with her every night, and at the cafeteria right inside Graduate House, which was wonderful. Anyway, so then we got married, and we had my first son, Frankie. And then I was still interested in building stuff. I mean, and so when we got married, we had like 6 months to move into we knew we were going to move into the apartment in 6 months before we got married. So I started designing furniture because I love furniture and I love building things. And Phyllis and I were always arguing about my designs. I came up with like 20 different designs. The nice thing was, and they had like an armory building in MIT in the basement of the armory, the old armory building. And they had a complete wood shop. And so because I was minoring in architecture, I got a lot of experience with designing things. And so she finally agreed to my design. So we had one big room, we had a small kitchenette and a bathroom. And I told Phyllis that I didn't want to have a bed in the middle of the room. I wanted it out of the way. I wanted to have a nice open room with a couch and a dining table and all this stuff. So I designed this thing, and she went along with it. So I made all the parts inside the shop, and we actually had to go to a lumberyard called Duane's, where they took old beams made out of yellow pine from these warehouses, like 12 inches square, 12 feet long. And I was able to cut them up and make all the parts I needed. I put them on top of my father-in-law's Bart's car. I drove him to the to the place we were staying in Westgate. And we got an apartment on the 16th floor, which is the top, overlooking the Charles River and the Citgo sign and the Prudential Center. It was a beautiful room, beautiful view. And then I had all this stuff. And then I also made these cement weights that weighed about, I don't know, close to like 700 or 800 pounds. And so I built this thing so that in the nighttime, the bed would be down. And underneath it was a dining table with 6 chairs that I built with my wife. And then when we wanted to have a daytime, I would take the whole bed and it would go straight up and the counterweights would go down. And then there was a light on the side. We hung a light underneath the bed so that we'd have a light over the dining table. And we had friends over and relatives and all this other stuff. And then when Frankie came along, Florence, which is Phyllis's mom, came over and she was taking care of diapers and stuff. And between these 4 big beams holding up the bed, she strung a clothesline and was drying clothes inside the apartment. It was a great time. And so then eventually Frankie came along, and then we moved to a different apartment. And eventually I graduated. My parents came up to see me graduate, which was really wonderful. And then while I was at MIT, before I graduated and finished my thesis, I was always doing kind of crazy things, but I took a course in radioisotope applications as part of my PhD, and they talked about working with the Boston Children's Hospital, which was trying to design an artificial part powered by nuclear power. So they're going to have a radioisotope which gave off heat, and then this is supposed to be inside your body. It was going to generate steam and push a piston back and forth to pump the blood. I looked at that and said to the professor, this is ridiculous. I'll design something better. So he said, okay, Frank, go ahead. They always let me do what I wanted to do. And so I designed a pump that had no moving parts. It had like a magnetic pump, which actually designed for reactors. And it just had a tube. You had a wire going one side and the other where electric current passed through. And then if you had a liquid that conducted electricity, you can actually, by running the current and having a magnet, you actually can push the fluid through without a propeller or any of that jazz. So I designed this whole thing. I won't go into great detail. But anyway, I did that, and I actually won American Nuclear Society Student Award for my design. And then eventually I graduated, And I was looking for jobs. I spent like another 6 months. I finished like in January and June. I had to leave, but they let us stay in the apartment till June. So I sent out applications, and we sent applications to teach, to Wyoming, because we thought it was really sounding a great country to be in Wyoming, and all these different colleges. Nothing happened. And I also sent it to, Commonwealth Edison in Chicago, which had nuclear power plants. And they by the way, I got a fellowship to MIT to go, because I applied after I got out of City College. I graduated third in my class. I got the fellowship, so I didn't have to pay any money. It would have been a fortune, never could afford it. So I got the fellowship, went to MIT through all those years, the teaching assistant for a couple of years, then got an MIT fellowship. Anyway, when I got out, I put all of my resumes out, and I sent the resume to Commonwealth Edison. Well, it turns out one of the guys that was in our classes graduated like 6 months before me. His name was Bruin Royston. I always remember it. And when he saw my resume come by, he said, hire this guy. And so when I met him, I says, how come I got this job? He says, well, I remember you got that award for the nuclear-powered artificial heart. So I says, great, terrific. So then I worked at Dresden, which was a nuclear power plant, and I worked there for about a year. And I had a lot of fun, did a lot of things. And then they promoted me, and I got sent to the main office in Chicago. Because the first one was in Morris, Illinois. This was in Chicago, Illinois. We lived in Woodbridge. I used to take the commuter train back and forth into the center of Chicago. And I had a desk among a million desks. That's what they used to do. They had no cubicles in those days. And I did a lot of, engineering work, and something always would go wrong with the reactor at 3 o'clock in the morning. I have to drive 3 hours from Chicago, near Chicago, back to Quad Cities, which was near Iowa, to fix things, to tell them what was wrong. And I just loved it. It was a lot of fun. But my wife Phyllis was getting, kind of lonely for her family back in Boston. So I actually met some guy on a plane after a couple of years, and he says, Combustion Engineering is a great company. I work for it in Connecticut. Why don't you think about that? So I applied to it. I got the job. And then I worked there for like 16 years.
Where was the spot where you fixed the reactor with the...
Oh, yeah, this is funny. We had a reactor. It was a boiler. They had 2 boiling water reactors.
Is that MIT, right?
No, this was at
Dresden.
Okay. Yeah. So what they would do is when they wanted to refuel, they had the reactor. Then they had like about 40, 50 feet high, tube around it. And then on the side, they had something called a nuclear fuel pool. And then what they would do is, if you kept the fuel, when they pull the fuel rods out, when you pulled them out, if you kept them underwater, and there was like at least 8-10 feet of water between them and the people, it would shield all the radiation. So in order to take the fuel up, they would pull it up with a crane. Then they had something called a cattle chute, which went over from the reactor core, went over something, which was a section called I forget now, where they had all the tubes and pipes and all that stuff. And then it would go into the fuel pool. And they would take it through this chute, and then they would put it down in the fuel pool. They'd protect it while it decayed. Anyway, they'd have to put 40 feet of water in above the reactor head, pull the reactor head out, pull the fuel up, move it over, put it down. It took like a month to refuel the reactor. And the problem was that when they wanted to get rid of that water, they had like 20 different holes around the bottom, just above the sides of the reactor, where they would drain all the water out. Well, the way the world works is one of the holes underneath this cattle chute was leaking. So they said, oh no, we're gonna have to drain all the water out, fix that leaking hole, and then fill it up again, and all this other stuff. Shut down, the whole reactor would be shut down, but then put the lid on, do all this other stuff. So I says, well, let me look at it. So I went into the thing, I looked at it for a few minutes, and I always didn't carry more like 35, 40 cents on me, never had much money. So I went into the plant manager. I says, look, give me $10 and I'll fix this for you. He says, what? I said, yeah, just give me $10, I'll fix it. So I took my car, went to the 5 and 10. I got a small plastic, like beach ball, about 6 inches in diameter. Then we used to have this stuff that they used to put like to block up something if you had a hole or something. It was called monkey shit. That's what they called it. So I drilled a hole into this ball. I filled it up solid with this monkey shit. I drilled a hole through it. I put a rope on it, right through the thing with a knot. Then I made like a large L-shaped tool it was like a pipe, 40 feet long and 6 feet wide, like L-shaped. I had the ball suspended on the end of this thing. I had guys looking at it from different plots. I took the tube down, I put it over the place so the ball was over the hole that was leaking, and then I cut the string and the ball went whoop, right into the hole, stopped the leak. We saved $1 million.
And the monkey stuff cured up like a rock, right?
Yeah, well, it was
Glue.
because it was solid, it
In the
couldn't
ball.
go down the
Yeah,
hole.
yeah.
It was squeezed a little
Yeah,
bit,
yeah.
but it just couldn't go down, so the water stopped completely. So it probably was like $500,000 a day for the reactor being down. So I saved them a lot of money. I didn't even get a beer out of it, but I had the satisfaction to do it. It was just wonderful. So then after that, I stayed there, and then I went to the main office, in the project management office, worked there for like a year. And then I got this other job for combustion engineering. So Phyllis was so happy when we had to go back to Boston. And it was really nice. Combustion engineering was 100 miles away from New York City where my parents were, because there was some little tension there. And 100 miles away from Boston where her parents were, which I had no problems with any of them, but this was a good way. So we moved into Chateau Wood, which was which was a little north. I forget what the heck the town of it now. It was Kennedy Road in Windsor. Yeah. So we were there, and we lived there for about a year. And Mom started, saving money for everything, and I built some boats while I was there, and. Then after that, we finally got a house in Suffield, Connecticut, and we lived there for a while. And then I got an idea, like in the mid-70s, that I wanted to build. I had a new concept for a sailboat.
Didn't you go with Frank and you had a boat to get them tipping over?
Yeah. I had built this boat actually. Sorry, I had built this boat, which was like a catamaran. I built that when we were in Chicago.
Okay.
And it was an interesting design. Still exists. Nick has a copy. He has it.
Yeah.
And I put these wild sails on it called the Dragonfly boat. And I built it. It was kind of heavy, but it worked. And I took Frankie with me to go to Indian guides at a place called Triangle Lake in Suffield. And so we took it out. We had a canoe. A little wind. Now catamarans are very, very stable. And I had it out there. A little wind came up, the damn thing turned over. So then I had like that eureka moment. I says, the heck with this. I don't care what boats look like. I'm going to design a boat on engineering principles. I don't care if they look like this for 10,000 years. I'm going to come up with something new. So I started designing this boat. And then we used to go up to Hampton Beach, New Hampshire for vacation with Frankie and Nicky, and we had a wonderful time. Anyway, one day it was kind of raining and cloudy, so I told the kids, I said, let's build one of my models of this thing to see how well it works. I had sketched it out and everything. So I got some dowel sticks at the store, I got some kite string, I got some styrofoam cups, I got some glue, I forget, duct tape. I had some kind of glue, I guess, this caulking or something. And for each of the hulls, I had 3 hulls. I took two styrofoam hulls and glued them together, 2 cups, so that they would have a space inside to be buoyant. And that formed the 3 hulls. And then the dowel sticks formed like a tetrahedron. And then for the sails, I just took some aluminum foil and formed a sail shape. And then we picked it up and we went through the waves at Hampton Beach, further in than the breakers were going. I put it down, and it just happened to be that the wind was coming offshore, onshore. This thing sailed right through the breakers. The breakers went right through the middle of it because there was no deck. the sails were okay, sailed right up onto the shore. And I said, I got it. So then I started working on models, and I showed my father, and I said, Dad, you know, I got this design for a new boat. So he says, why don't you go back to MIT? And so I went back there, and I showed him. I actually made the boat out of copper tubing and plumbing
Right.
stuff. And they were interested because at that time the National Science Foundation funded an innovation center at MIT. They were looking for designs, new designs they could fund to encourage innovation. So I made a presentation to them. I showed them the model. They had a team of aeronautic engineers and mechanical engineers. They looked at it all and said, okay, we'll fund the first patent on this boat, but if we can't sell it in 3 years, the patent will revert to you. And that was my first patent. And it took forever to educate the patent lawyers about what I was trying to do, how it worked, all this other stuff. And then I had an advisor at MIT who told me, look, you know, we'll make some presentations. So I made up a slide presentation, which I still have. And we showed it to AMF, American Machine and Foundry, and Coleman, and all these people who were involved in sporting equipment. And they said, oh, this is a great idea, it really looks good, but my company will never do it. I says, why not? This guy was the head of the materials group or something. He says, look, we got these styrofoam boats that we're using now, sailfish, sail fins, whatever it was. And I came up with a composite material that's twice as, you know, half as light. And they won't do it because they don't want to do anything to undercut their existing inventory. So he said, they'll never go for it. It's too wild. When we make a new boat, we extend the length a half a foot or a foot. We paint it a different color. This is our innovation. This is great. So then I had an advisor at MIT. And after a couple of these presentations, he says, Frank, you got to build one. I says, okay, great.
Sweet.
So I said, so I signed it up. I had all the stuff and everything. The patent was in progress. And I talked to my wife, Phyllis, and I said, you know, I really need like a welder to put this thing together. I'm gonna, instead of dowel sticks, I'm gonna use aluminum tubing. So she said, okay, let's take the money we get back from income tax. You can buy the welder. It was like $2,000. It was a lot of money. But I got it, and I whatchamacallit, and so I ordered these tubes. I ordered these 5-inch diameter tubes. All this stuff came, and I started realizing this was going to cost a lot more money than I had. I mean, I spent $2,000 on the welder, then a little $500 for the tubes. So I said, look, I got to get some investors. So I formed this company called Innovative Technology. And I talked to some of the people at Combustion Engineering that I was working at. I said, will you help me fund this? And so Charmaine Temple and Tom Temple, husband and wife, gave me like $15,000. And I got that, and I built this 16-foot wide by 18-foot long triangular base with a 35-foot mast. And I built the thing, and it took forever to build it. And then what happened was Phyllis decided to go back and get her master's degree at UMass Amherst. And so we moved out and we rented our house in Suffield, and we went up to Amherst and we rented a house over there. And the first house was kind of small, but it had a basement, so I moved in my welder, I had the tubes, I was welding every night, all this stuff.
Is this
And
the
that-
we're at the barn?
This is the first one. No, it didn't have a
Okay,
barn.
okay.
This was 4 Moorland Drive.
Okay.
Then the second year we moved to another place for a year, and this was on I forget Hampton, what the heck is it?
Amherst?
Northampton,
Was
something.
it Amherst or?
In Amherst, yeah.
Okay.
And this, and I had all the stuff down the cellar, but it was only half cellar. I couldn't build a workbench or anything. There was a small barn out the back. It was like maybe 15 feet wide. It had an attic, about maybe 25 feet long. And I told Phyllis, I'm really getting depressed. You know, I just can't build anything. I like to work on the boat. She said, well, why don't you work in the barn? So I said, okay. So I took the same workbench that I had in Suffield, and I brought to 4 Moorland Drive in Amherst. I reassembled it inside the barn. The trouble was, inside the barn, there was no facilities. So for the welder, I needed cooling water. I needed 200 amp current. I need a telephone line, I needed intercom line, and I don't know, and that was about it. And of course, general electricity for lighting and all this stuff. So I was like, well, how am I going to get all this stuff in there? So I talked to one of the guys at work. His father had like, I don't know, a couple of 100 feet of this, big heavy gauge wire, 3-phase wire. And so I took it, I got a big spindle that people wrap all the wires around, about 3 feet in diameter. I hung it up inside the garage, hung it down from the ceiling, and the kids were young, and so I would put them to sleep, tell them a story, and they had the intercom in case there was any problems. They could call me while I was working at night, because Phyllis was working till like 11 o'clock at night in the library. And then I had a telephone line out there too, in case somebody called me. And then I had the water to cool off the welder, and I had the 200 amp stuff going into the welder. And so I had all that stuff inside the barn. And I also had a quartz lamp that I used to provide heat, because there was just, there's no insulation.
Yeah.
So I was welding every night and all this stuff. And then one night, or one day, some old lady next door came by and she said, I see this green light coming out of the barn at night. I said, I'm building something, don't worry about it. She's okay. She went away. But it must have been really spooky, because there was a lot of space between the boards on the side of and all this green glow coming out.
And the light from the welder was
From
like a
the welder,
blue-green light.
yeah,
Does it
blue-green
crack all the
light.
cracks?
Yeah.
Well, Frank and I saw you. We were going to ask you what you're doing. So you're building a
Oh
space.
yeah, so I never let the kids out there, but then they asked me what I was doing. So I said, okay,
Well, we couldn't go out when the welder was going because it would hurt our eyes.
Yeah.
So we could never see what you were doing.
Right.
But we knew something was going on.
That's what I was going. So okay, so one night, I said, okay, let's go. It was around 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's dark. So I said, okay, come on out with me. I'll show you. So we went outside. I had a big lock on the barn door. I opened it up. Then I grabbed this big cable and dragged it across the yard about 30 feet. Plugged everything in, hooked up the water, hooked up the phone lines, all the other stuff.
We're so
The
amazed.
kids were kind of amazed. I turn on all the lights, whoop, all the lights are on. And then I said, now I'm going to show you what I've been building. And what I had done is I had built this thing, and like the first part of the boat, and I had taken it and put it up in the attic. So I had always told the kids like science fiction stories, the funny, I used to make them up, all these stories.
Spaceman Jim.
Spaceman Jim. So I went up the ladder, Frankie came up the ladder with me, Nikki came up the ladder with me, and I said, see what I'm building? And Frankie was really disappointed. He said, oh gee, I thought you were Spaceman Jim. I thought we were going to go out into space in your rocket ship. Poor kid, I felt so bad.
You said you used to open up the doors and underneath the shop was your spaceship.
Yeah, I always used to make up all this stuff. It was so much fun. Anyway, so I kept building. Then from there, we moved back to West Hartford, because we didn't want to live in Suffield again. The schools weren't that great, and Mom wanted to take the kids to the schools in West Hartford, which were supposed to be good. And we put Frankie in the school first, and he was at the regular high school, but it was kind of weird. There was like cliques and all this other stuff, and it wasn't so great. So she put him in Northwest Catholic High School, and when Nicky got out of grade school, he went to Northwest Catholic High School. So they both graduated from that. And then they went to college. I continued building the boat. And we were in Suffield we were in West Hartford for about 16 years or so. And continued building. And then I finally got the boat finished. Then I decided, all right, we got to take it out. So I had some information. I had some friends help me and all this stuff. One guy had a speedboat. And I rented a U-Haul truck. I was building it in my backyard, and I'll tell you one funny story. I was building it in my backyard, had a 35-foot mast on it, which came in 2 sections. And one day I was out there, and we had all the space frame all set up with the hulls and all the other stuff, and the 35-foot mast. And my son Frankie was out with me, and 3 black helicopters flew right over the yard at very low altitude. And I turned to my son Frank, I said, what the heck is going on? And so Frankie said to me, Dad, your mast is aimed at Hartford. Anyway, so we put it all inside the U-Haul trailer. We drove out to Barn Island in Rhode Island, and I had people come out to help me. It took 8 hours to put the boat together from the parts. I sailed for 2 hours. It took 8 hours to take it apart again and to get it back in the truck and drive back home. So I said, this is ridiculous. So, started building again. I built a 24-foot long trailer to tow behind my car. We had a Chevy something or other.
Blazer?
Not the Blazer, it was a Chevy
Impala.
Impala,
Yeah, the red car.
red one. So I built this big trailer. I put the boat on top of the trailer. We took it out a couple more times, and we sailed it. I changed the design a couple of times, and then I said, I could do a lot better than this.
Redesign it.
I redesigned it because we had a mainsail and a jib. I had like 60 ropes on the thing for the sails and for the jib and for the anti-rotation of the main mast and all this other stuff. And so I said, I'm going to design something that's simpler. So I left that in the backyard on the trailer, and I built the smaller boat, the first one I called Tridactyl, the second one I called Tridactyl 2. That was only maybe 12 feet on the side. It had surfboards instead of aluminum hulls like I had before. And it had, instead of using a mast, I made the two masts with sails, part of the tetrahedron, and I had a big spar in the back, made the whole thing rigid. And then I had Technicolor rainbow sails on it. And instead of having 60 ropes, it had 4 ropes. And there was a bar between the two booms. And if I went this way, the sails would change for the wind angle. And then when I rotated the tube, the rudder would rotate.
In the very back.
On the very back. And then we took it out, I forget the name, to some lake in Connecticut. And then one of the masts folded up on me. I didn't make it strong.
You just sort of bend and fold up and sort of
bent,
bend a little
bent,
bit.
yeah. So then I modified it. And then I still kept thinking. And I said, I gotta do something different. But it was getting expensive. And the other thing is my investors, they were still doing it, but they were waiting for me to come up with something that I could sell. So I stopped doing that, and I started designing Tridactyl 3. And instead of building a full-scale boat, I decided to build a boat that was like a small boat where I wouldn't get in it, but I could modify it easily. It wouldn't cost me thousands of dollars. And that was Tridactyl 3. It only took like 15 years to design that to be foldable and all these new designs and the sails, all this other stuff. And then that sat there for a while. And meanwhile, the kids went to college, and Frankie went to Europe for a summer and met his future wife, Christina. And then Nicky went to Europe with his friend Jay when we moved down to Virginia. And they came back and all this other stuff. And then I kept working on the boat stuff. And then, like in 2011, I had been involved with the MIT Enterprise Forum in Connecticut, then in Washington, D.C. when we lived in Virginia. And then up in, when we moved up to...
Well, how about when we moved out of the basement in Connecticut with a welder?
Oh yeah. When we had to move out of the basement to go to Virginia, we had all this. The movie people come, and I warned them. I have this 500-pound welder that has to get out of the cellar. We have to bring the right guys. So naturally, they came.
But
and they left
stairs were like the steep, it was like basement crawl stairs.
Yeah, the big stairs going up like 7 or 8 feet from the basement out the back hatchway. And the guys moved the furniture and left the welder. And meanwhile, I was gone visiting Mom every weekend while she was working in Virginia. And Nicky decided he was going to get that damn welder out for me. So he took a winch that I had. He took this long ramp that I had built to get the welder down from the first floor down into the cellar. He put that up the cellar stairs.
Butter.
He put butter on the rails. And he put the winch around the tree, and he hauled the damn welder up until it was in the yard. And I came back. He says, "What's the welder doing up there?" And Nicky said, "I did it for you while you were gone." It was a blessing. It was just wonderful. So then we moved. We moved up to wherever we live now.
No, you moved to Sterling.
Sterling.
And then
from Sterling, I didn't do any work on the boat. I just was playing some design work. And then we moved to, whatchamacallit, to, where do we live?
Westford.
Westford.
Tell us more about the shop with the workbench that you made.
Oh
that
yeah,
cool
the
design
workbench that I had
that you had.
was from the one that I had in Suffield initially. So that was in 1970, I don't know, 71 or 72 probably. But it was a triangular workbench, and I used to built it around lolly columns, which used to hold up the beam of the first floor. And I took it apart. It came apart in sections, and I took it apart, and I moved it into Amherst in one place, moved it into the barn the second time, then I moved it from there back into West Hartford, then I moved it out of there into Virginia, but I couldn't do anything in Virginia because the bottom basement was finished, and I put it in the garage, but it was too darn hot to do any work, so I started doing stained glass work and all this stuff, and then I moved it up from there into
Westford.
Westford. So I moved it into Westford, and then was building and building and building, and then like in 2011, MIT Enterprise Forum had this big contest where people were allowed to distribute their innovative designs for people at the Nerd Center. It was the New England Engineering something from, I think Microsoft funded it or something. So we didn't think we were going to get it. We didn't think we were going to get in. They gave me trouble. They wanted a model. They wanted a different model, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I was down in Disney World with Frankie and his family, and we're in Animal Kingdom, and I got a call from MIT, and they said, yes, you can bring your stuff. Then we went crazy. We had 2 weeks. I built a model of this new concept where I was going to use sail power to push tanker vessels across the ocean using just the wind from the trade winds. So we built a model of it. We had it all. We set it up. Everybody loved it. It was all this stuff. We got a lot of kudos and stuff. And then we talked to Maersk briefly, and they thought it was a good idea, but I had to get a business plan together. Anyway, a lot of stuff went on for a number of years. And then what happened was I decided, all right, I'm going to really try and push this. So I made a website, we changed the name, Innovative Marine Technology. And then I wanted to I didn't know anything about tanker vessels. I just thought it was a good idea. So I talked to one of my friends at Mass Maritime. I used to work at Mass Maritime, and I said, do you know anybody at Mass Maritime that I can talk to? I need somebody who knows something about tanker vessels. And Mass Maritime trains people to run tankers and container ships. So I talked to this Captain Bushy. So I made an appointment. I went down to see him. I showed him all my designs and all this stuff. He's looking at all this stuff. He says, well, I have a 29-foot tanker vessel, weighs 29,000 pounds. It only goes like 3 knots because we trained the cadets to drive this thing around. It had bow thrusters. It had all this same stuff as a 1,000-foot tanker, but a small size, less power. He says, why don't you build one of these things? We call it Tanker Pro in that because it was an outrigger. And I said, okay. So I started building it, and Frankie kept pushing me, well, when are you going to test it? When are you going to test it? And first year, I couldn't finish it all up. In the second year, I said, all right, I'll try and do it. So on, I think it was August 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, put the whole thing in a truck again and went down to Mass Maritime, built the thing at Mass Maritime. I had met a guy called Drew Wojcicki on a flight to San Francisco, and it turned out he was sitting next to me. He was a marine engineer. He had graduated from Mass Maritime. He said, I want to be involved. So he came down and helped me. Frankie helped me. Joe DiCristoforo, Phyllis's brother, came down and helped me. And we did a broad reach run where the wind came from the side. It was like 7 or 8 knot winds. We were able to turn off the engines, and the sail pushed the boat the same speed as the engines could do it. Then the next day we took it out, but the winds were much stronger. They normally don't allow anybody on this 350-acre lake in Plymouth, Massachusetts. But this time the captain evidently thought that this design was good enough to take a shot. So all the small sailboats had to come in when the wind hit 10 knots, and it was gusting to 20 knots. So we took this out and we tried to go downwind. But it did do it for short periods when the wind was in the right direction. We went downwind at about 4 or 5 knots. It was great. But then the wind would change directions like instantly, because it wasn't wind like on the ocean where it's constant in one direction. You're inside a lake surrounded by hills and mountains and stuff like that. So the wind would suddenly change to different directions. We started to get little white caps on the water, and the waves started coming over the deck, and the deck was about maybe 1.5 feet higher than the level of the water when it was calm. So the wind would hit the sails in like the worst direction. It wasn't like aimed to generate thrust. It would be like sideways to the sails. And the sails weather vane, they went around, but the thing was like a rock. It was stable with the wind gusts and everything else. It was perfectly flat. I walked around on the deck. There was no problems. We were able to sail it through all this stuff, and eventually we came back. And again, it was very, very successful. And we got those 2 runs in. The next day we took it apart and we brought it all back. And then we continued trying to get people interested. I went to various conferences at MIT and Harvard and all this stuff. People were somewhat interested, but the venture capitalists, all they understood was internet, biotech, computers, and that was it. They talked about boats. They had no idea what the hell I was talking about. I would send them all this stuff, nothing. I saw Senator Kerry's office. I went there, talked to one of his people. They said, very interesting, nothing. I sent emails to the president. I met Ray Mabus, the Secretary of the Navy, at a meeting in Hartford. I gave him some stuff. I tried to convince him it was a good idea. It took about a year, nothing ever happened. So I said, we're not getting any place. But we kept trying. And so then, keeping this up, keeping up the website. Oh, and then what happened was, like back in February of this year, I saw something in The Economist. They had an Ocean Innovation Challenge. It was going to be run in Portugal for things that would help keep the seas, free of pollution, wouldn't hurt the atmosphere, cut down on carbon dioxide, eliminate noise from diesel engines, a whole bunch of stuff. So I had like a whole bunch of people on my team, and I talked to Ian Miller, who's an architect. He was on my team. I says, we really could use I have to send in a 2-minute video. And so Nicky developed the video, and really did 99% of the work. And then we showed it to Ian Miller, and he developed this really professional video because he's an architect. He has to provide videos for presentations of buildings and how it looks when you walk through it. Mm-hmm. So he showed the whole operation of the boat. And I submitted it, nothing. We didn't get anything out of it. But it was nice having the video. And so we started circulating it around. I sent it to Frankie, and Frankie showed it to some people. Then we had a meeting in New Orleans on June 9th with one of Frankie's prior bosses, which was like head of the World Trade Center of New Orleans. And he introduced us this guy from Wall Street. His name was Martin Schubert. We spent about an hour and a half talking to him about this stuff. The guy was very interested. They were very interested in doing something, but they wanted $10,000 a month for 6 months to find us some investors for the concept. So we thought about it and said, just can't do it. Just can't, can't afford that kind of money. So meanwhile, Frankie had another friend that was like an office mate of his in Destin, Florida, and he talked to that guy, and that guy was like an investment guy. Anyway, most recently, he got it to some people for Bill Gates's Cascade Investments, and they said they were interested. And right now, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're not dead yet, so that's good. Any other questions, I see?
How about your architecture class?
Oh, yeah. When I was at MIT, you had to take a minor, and a lot of people took physics or math. I wanted to take something else. I was interested in art, and at one time I wanted to do architecture because I like to be creative, but I didn't want to have somebody else tell me what to do. So I just minored in architecture. So I had 3 courses. The first one I got an A in, the second one I got a B, and the third one I got a C with the proviso that I never take another architecture course. And the second one that I got a B in we had this new architect that came in to run that class. He was from Australia, and the guy was wild. And he just was very creative. He told us if you play an instrument, bring it into class. And during intercession of that year, what he did was we had these classrooms with all tables down on the first floor. But we had like 16, 20-foot ceiling, big windows up the side. And we had a couple of rooms that were adjacent to each other, but we had a corridor between them and walls. This guy decided we were going to go down to this place called Dwayne's with all this lumber that we had used for my for my furniture, and we went there, and he knocked down the walls during this month because none of the administration people were there. He knocked down the walls and had us build like multi-level structures. So there was like 3 or 4 levels. People could build whatever they want. We had a couch in there. We had beer in the refrigerator. We had
building
desks,
code nightmare.
Building code nightmare. We built all this stuff, all different levels. Most of the kids did most of the work. I did a little bit. I had someplace on the bottom because I wasn't an architecture major. I was doing nuclear engineering. But I did get a desk and all this stuff. Anyway, he was telling people, we'd come in and bring your instruments and be creative and all this stuff. So anyway, so the first project we had was for an ecological survey station. And it was supposed to be on the side of a lake. And so I was supposed to build this thing. So, building balsa wood, I was familiar from all my other projects. And so I built this thing, but I decided, he says be creative, so I'm going to be creative. So what I did was, I made this structure, and I had a bedroom in it. I didn't even know what ecological meant at the time. I built this bedroom, and I had a slanting floor. So when the guys get up from sleeping to go down to breakfast, they'd go down a slanting floor. It was a bit easier to go to breakfast. So what the professor would do is he'd have 5 to 10 different projects in the central galley, and then you had all these multi-layers with these kids hanging off all this stuff. And then he would go to each project, he'd walk around, he'd look at it, and he would critique it. Well, when it came to mine, he looked at it with a very serious face. And I could see the blood rising, his neck was getting all red, he was getting angry. And so he looked at this thing, and he went down, and he saw my balsa wood thing. He bent down, and he bit a piece of the balsa wood beam. He chewed on it and spit it out and said, it doesn't even taste good. He hated it. So the next project I had to do, I built something there, and I wasn't so radical, but I did put a chocolate beam in it. So when he came to examine it, I said, if you want to chew on something, try this beam over here. And some of the kids after class told me, you should have made the beam out of something else that was brown. So that was funny though, because it was beautiful for a couple of years. And then when the people came back and also saw all this, this knocking down the walls, and putting all this stuff.
Fire hazard.
The fire hazard. They had one guy was cooking sausages on a hibachi inside the classroom.
Yeah.
And we had wine and stuff. We had a great time. Smoke was going out the window. Anyway, they sort of, I'm going to take this down. They finally decided, all right, we got to install sprinklers. They put sprinkler systems in. It lasted like 3, maybe 5 years. But then, the bureaucrats came in and they knocked it all down. And they had a little section where some of the other architecture professors built some piece of junk that was made with nice clean lumber. It was nice and square.
Yeah.
Didn't have any rough lumber in it.
Right.
There was no beer, no couch.
Yeah.
They just killed the creativity of the whole thing, which is a shame. But it was a wonderful time while I was there. Really enjoyed it.
All right, so talk about.
Yep.
Okay, so here's a little history of the Berthet name. From what I understand, my relatives a few generations back actually came from Corsica. And Corsica was initially it was an Italian island. And then it was conquered by the French. So they left Corsica, they went to Sicily. And in Sicily, there's a lot of Berthets. And as a matter of fact, when Phyllis and I were visited Verona, we got a hotel, and when I mentioned my last name, they said, "Oh, you're from Sicily." how do you know that? He says, there's all these Bertays are in Sicily. So it was really nice, and I hope someday maybe go back to Corsica and see what it looks like, because it's supposed to be really mountainous and beautiful, but there's Italians that are constantly like a little terrorist group.
Right.
But they warn everybody before they blow anything up. They usually blow up a post office or something like that. I haven't heard anything recently, but they used to do this. You know, they want the French to get out of it.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And I just want to mention something else, a little aside about my courtship to my wife.
Get some fresh air.
And what happened was it was nice because when we were decided to get married, what I would do is not only would I see her every day and walk her home at night after work or school and stuff like that, but also every Saturday morning I would buy flowers at this place called Sam's Flower Shop in Central Square, and I'd have 2 pockets in my coat, and one pocket would have Spanish olives and the other pocket would have figs. And so I'd go up there Saturday morning, I'd knock on the door. Phyllis would come down from a little tiny room about as big as my closet, come downstairs in a bathrobe. She'd give me a big hug, and then she'd put her hands in my pockets and get the figs and the Spanish olives that she loved, and the flowers. It was so great. We did it every single Saturday until we got married. And it was wonderful. I was always crazy. And she liked ribbons for her hair. So of course I bought like 10 ribbons all at once.
Talk about the camping trip.
Oh, the camping trips?
Yeah.
So anyway, when we were up in living in Amherst, Nikki was still kind of young, but Frankie was a little older. And one day I took Frankie out with me. We rented a canoe at Sportsman's Marina, and we were next to the Connecticut River. And we went out and we went upstream. Because I always feel you go upstream, on the way back, the stream will take you back down to Sportsman Marina, which was in Hadley, Massachusetts. So we went up there once and I said, wow, this is a great island. How do we go camping or something? So what happened was, a couple of weeks later, we bought supplies, which consisted of, salami, chewing gum, and some other stuff. And we had a tent. And we went up there, we pulled the canoe up. We went in the tent, we ate the salami, we had the chewing gum. We just stayed one night. Then we came back. And Nick was really upset because he wanted to come with us. And the next year, we went up there again. This time we took Nicky. And we also had Barney, which is Phyllis's brother. And every time we'd go, it would rain. It was always raining. I was always take garbage bags, put it over our heads, and make a hole for our heads so we could walk around in the rain. And it kept getting more and more people getting interested because Frankie had friends, Nikki had friends, and we continued to do it from 1981. We did it up until we left to go to Virginia. Then we didn't do it for a couple of years, and we came back in 93, and we started doing it again, and then we did it up until 2013. Then we skipped it in 2014, and now we're hoping to do it in 2015. But it got better and better, and then we started deciding. I wrote little stories about it after the Chronicles, and then one year Nikki came up with the idea of taking 2 canoes and take a couple of pieces of small trees, put it across, make it into a catamaran, and then he put some ropes across and like an X, and then some ropes going to the top of this piece of wood. It had like a branch on it at the top. Then we put a crossbar on it, and we took like a blue tarp, and we hung it from this thing like a square sail. And then the kids wanted to go out every night in the middle of the river. Silly. And they'd shine the light, because you're supposed to have lights on your boat in the river. So we had like a flashlight shining on the blue tarp. And then motorboats would be going by, and I wonder what they thought. They saw this big blue sail out there. And it was so funny, and then it was so much fun. It just got more and more interesting. So after Nikki came up with that idea, what I did was I decided, all right, I'll make a better one. So I got plastic tubing, and I made like a catamaran type of design where I had 2 sides on it, rails, I put shields on the side. Everybody painted their shields.
Viking.
And then we decided we got a Viking motif. Frankie did a Viking sail.
Yep.
And then I built a dragon head that we stuck on top of the mast. And I told Nikki, I'd like to make it like fire breathing. We discussed it a little bit. And Nikki said, I'll take care of the fire breathing. So he got this, it's carburetor cleaner, and he made all this device, and he pulled the thing, and and he had a lighter up there, and eventually he had like red eyes that would, shine in the night. And when he pulled the string, a big blast of flame would come out of the front about 4 feet. And we did it at nighttime, and then in the daytime we'd go up and down the river with the sail, and then when we went by like campsites, we'd shoot off the flames, and they would say, more flames, more flames. And then like one night, I remember we were out there and fooling around with the canoes, and some people could say, are you guys making a movie? It's no, we're just having fun. So much great. And then what happened, like a year or two later, I was in my canoe, and I was trying to get off at the dock at the Sportsman Marina, and I fell in, and then I was going to lose my shoes, and the boat was like half sunk, and I was holding on to the dock for dear life. Somebody came and saved me. I said, all right, the heck with that. I'm putting an outrigger on this thing.
Yeah.
So I built this outrigger on the canoe. It was like a proa. And then I had a big dragon's head on the front, and I put my lance up there with a couple of lights on the top of it. And then I had a big tail on the back where I could lean back and row. And then we put a trolling motor on it with batteries, so I could go up and down the river to bring people up and down. Oh, it's just, then we had like 15 people. We had like 5 kids from one family on my block. Nikki had Joel and Docky and Joel's father. It became like a father and son thing.
Yeah.
And then Nikki at nighttime would always used to do nunchucks, and he'd
Glow
put
sticks.
like light sticks on,
Yeah,
glow
glow
sticks
sticks,
on,
yeah.
and he would swing them around and make all these beautiful designs. And then one time, Graham came, and he played the guitar. He played all these beautiful songs.
Yeah.
And we have a video of that. And Nikki would dress up like in hazmat outfits and with all these things.
Keyword.
And he would scare all the kids with a big mask and all this stuff. It was great. And then we always used to play drums, and Joel used to play drums and guitar. We all had drums, and Nikki played like a grape, and we were banging on all kinds of things. And Don took like pots and pans. He had his own band, and he brought like a drum, and I had a drum, and Nikki had a drum. And then one night it was really great. We're up there, and then like I don't know, a couple hundred feet away, there was another group of kids, but they had girlfriends with them. But they were part of a band. And so one night we were there, and they heard the drums and noises, and they said, oh, we'd like to join us. Great. So the next night, they brought all their drums up with cymbals and all this stuff, and they had all this stuff.
We had a whole band music concert.
And then we had we all made masks, and we had swords and this and that. Nikki was leaping over the fire. I was dancing around, doing all this crazy stuff, and then we had like 25 people there. It was wonderful, and we got the video to prove it. It was just wonderful. It was just wonderful fun. And then we actually got a couple of second generations. Like we got my grandson from Frankie came up. So we only had just boys there. We had my grandson Frankie came up for a number of years, and then Don, which is a friend, Saverin.
Don
Sarah. He used to be our neighbor in West Hartford. He came up with his little boy.
Yeah, a guy from France.
And we had a guy from France from my Tetra Engineering, and this guy from France, his father wanted him to get experience in a company. So he came up for a month to America. So everybody had, the 4 of us had him 1 week in our house. So he came to my house, but he lucked out because he stayed 2 days, and that was the week I was going on the camping trip. So we took him with us. And it was wonderful. Nikki made an American flag from the 2011, 2001, and he put this big American flag up, and we had fireworks and all this stuff going on. And, bamboo. Nikki used to have a bamboo forest. He made a big bridge down in Maryland,
I
and
mean,
it
like
lasted a number of
Yeah, we
years.
must have kept it though. I mean, couch and
Oh yeah, Nikki would make couches
Frankie
and
put
benches,
tarps.
and then Frankie made like a tiki
Tiki
bar.
bar.
All this stuff.
All right. How about if you talk about the Tetra Engineering, why you formed your own company?
Oh yeah. So when I was working at Combustion Engineering, I really had a good time, and I loved it. I did some work initially as an engineer as part of a group, and then eventually they made me supervisor. And so I always loved doing everything. I got involved, and they were having problems with. Somebody asked me in the hallway if I have a square probability distribution and a Gaussian distribution like a bell-shaped curve, how do I combine them? So I kind of remembered something from MIT with Monte Carlo techniques. So I went to the director of the nuclear engineering department and says, look, I think I can do this. I can use Monte Carlo techniques. So he told me somebody else must have thought of it, or else it's not going to work. I says, well, how about let me use the computer at night? He says, okay. So I worked on it for 6 months. I developed the Sigma code. Then I was using it. It was really worked fantastically. I was able to do Bessel function and all this other stuff. And so within my own department, he didn't want me to do anything. But there was another department, mechanical engineering, that designed fuel. And so I talked to the director of that company, and we had this code called, I forget, it was the thing for clad collapse and around the fuel rods. And what happened was, when they try to evaluate the effect of uncertainties, what they would do is say, okay, so let's take all the worst case uncertainties. So if you had 50 things that could vary, they would take the worst case of all 50, and that would allow them to only run the reactor for a year before they had to put fuel in it.
Yeah.
So I said, let me hook up my Monte Carlo technique to that code. So it was Sigma something or other, Sigma clad collapse or something like that. And so I wrote that code, and they loved it, and it worked great. And so we were able to extend the outages. Instead of making it once a year, they could make it once every 2 or 3 years. And so then we started using it like crazy. And so by that time I started having my own group, and we used it for set points for all the reactors to take care of uncertainties, and we did presentations in NRC. And then I developed, my director was interested in Bayes rules, so I developed the Bayes rule code, came up with some new statistics, and all the stuff, presented to the National Bureau of Standards, and we got money from EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute. We were doing great, and then we saved their ass many times, because what happened was sometimes there'd be problems with fuel problems, and they didn't know what to do, and I would put my whole team on it. Over the weekend we worked like 24 hours straight, calculating all the stuff, how long it would last before it broke, and all sorts of stuff. And then I wrote some other codes for fuel. Anyway, did a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
But combustion engineering started going down the tubes. We got a new director. We had Santry, and we got this other guy, came from Bell Labs. He didn't like...
Joe Braun.
No. This is a really big shot. Joe Braun was one of the managers. But he didn't like... He called our business the dirt business, because we worked with coal and nuclear power. And he was interested in electronics. So he blew all the money that we had, and he spent it on buying companies.
Yeah.
And the company just started going down the tubes. And then eventually, we said, look, this is ridiculous. The company, they had things like Save October, where where you're supposed to not buy paper clips or toilet paper or any of that stuff to try and save operating cash. So I told my guys, I said, look, we got to get out of here. I said, look, you can either go your separate ways. I'll look for a job, you can look for a job, but I think it'd be a better idea to stick together. So one of the guys went out and tried B&W down in someplace down south. He didn't like it, so we decided. So I worked on him for a year. Finally convinced them, okay, we're going to go out. So in the meantime, I was doing all this other stuff. I was developing codes for predicting life extension on fossil power plants, for nuclear steam generators, for all this stuff. And I was also working on automating the fuel production line, using statistical process control for that stuff.
And you're working on the boat.
And I was working on my boat. So,
And raising a family.
And raising a family. It was a wonderful time. So we had a really nice vice president in the nuclear fuel department. And so I talked to him, I said, look, if we go out, would you be willing to continue to let us consult for you? And nobody else is doing anything. We're like an
Right.
internal consulting group for the whole damn company.
Right. Yeah.
So he says, sure. So one of the guys didn't trust it. He sent one of the other guys. I had Dave Mellon and Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson came with me to make sure I wasn't bullshitting.
Yeah.
I never always saw it.
Yeah.
So he came and he said, yes, I'll support you, don't worry about it. So we left combustion engineering and we had a big going away party. And one of the things they do is they gave us a little bag with brass balls in it. Because nobody ever left combustion, three
Yeah,
guys in
right.
a
Start your
job.
company.
We said, we're just
Become a
going.
competitor.
Yeah,
Right,
we're just
yeah.
going. But they needed us, and we got like $1 million worth of work from them.
That's incredible.
The first year we made $20,000 a piece, and then it went up, and we got all this money, and we worked on the fuel. And then I was just a supervisor before. Then I started working for this guy in quality control, and this is Frank. We'd like to find out where all the money's going in this company. Would you make a big, figure out where the money's going? I'm not a money genius,
Yeah.
but I interviewed everybody and made this one-page chart
Yeah.
and showed that fossil was paying for nuclear and nuclear was getting money. What a total
Oh
disaster.
my goodness.
So we worked there for 3 or 4 years, and then the company combustion was sold to ABB Atom, which is another company. They stayed for a year or two, and then eventually that work just kind of evaporated.
Yeah.
And ABB got out of the nuclear business, sold everything to the nuclear part. They sold to Westinghouse. The fossil part they sold to Alstom, which is a
Okay.
French company, and they never hired us anymore.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
by that time we
Very good.
we were
Yeah.
going good. So,
Yeah.
and then we worked for nuclear for many years, but maybe like 5 or 7, maybe 10 years. And then the rest of the years, we started going into gas turbine combined cycle units, which
Yeah.
are very popular now. Now we have offices in the United States, in Connecticut. We have offices in Nice, France, and we just got an office in Dubai, in Qatar. Qatar.
Cool. What do you think the future is going to hold, and what do you think the future is going to be like in 50 to 100 years?
50 to 100 years. Well, we're probably going to be on all renewables because the people still think that nuclear is a bomb. They think
So you don't think we'll ever go to
I
full
don't know.
nuclear?
They have new designs now called NuScale, where they built. There was some problems in Russia. The people were crazy. They would do stuff. They wouldn't have any safety. We had like 4 levels of safety. Those guys had no levels of safety. They would play around with the reactor like it was a toy,
Mhm.
and they blew up Chernobyl. They had
Right.
no containment to protect
Yeah.
anybody and that stuff. And they've done a lot of crazy stuff. So that was bad. Then we survived all that stuff. Then Fukushima went off in whatchamacallit in Japan a few years ago because of a tsunami, which went through
Yeah.
and flooded everything. And then nuclear is no good. But they have some new designs which don't require any energy or anything like that. These things are safe. So if something goes wrong, they just shut down all by themselves. There's no radioactivity. But nobody ever died from radioactivity in
Right.
America. In Russia they did, but
Yeah.
over here they never died.
Right.
And I think in Japan some died because
Yeah. They didn't protect themselves.
they didn't protect themselves well enough. But
So
anyway,
where do you think the world will be in 50 to 100 years?
I don't know. I'm scared.
America?
I'm
Well,
scared.
what are your thoughts?
Well, because it'll probably be all renewable, but
No, just like not an energy scale. Like, where do you think
well, the whole world.
Yeah. Do you think?
I think it's going to get better. I'm worried about it because we have all these problems with terrorists and all this other stuff. But I think things are going to evolve because I think even though the internet has a lot of problems, the communication between peoples is good. And the more people can communicate and avoid, government restrictions and all this other stuff, eventually people are going to realize they're in one world and we all depend on each other and we need all the animals and the plants and all the other stuff, and we can't just go around wrecking everything for a short-term gain and long-term disaster.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a better world in 50 years.
What do you think about space travel? Like, when do you think we'll have people living on Mars?
I think that's going to take a long time. I think it's going to take a long time. The other thing is, every day they discover, at least as far as I know, they're discovering radiation problems in
Mhm.
space. They're discovering problems with low gravity hurting people's physical body. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to adapt my tachyon drive.
Space travel?
which was contained in my notes. All right.
How has religion affected your life
Okay.
from when you were a kid to
Yeah.
now?
Religion has always been part of my life. My father had a very strong religious belief when he was young, and then for some reason he got ticked off and he wouldn't go to Mass anymore. He still believed in God, but wouldn't go to Mass. He was mad at the church. But my mother really believed in God and taught me religion and taught me to believe in God and to pray. And she was the real inspiration for me to stick with religion. And I've stuck with it all my life, and I'm trying to, there's an infinite amount of room to improve, but I've been kind of fighting that all along to try and improve and not be so selfish or self-centered and all this other stuff. But I think God has been helping me through my whole life. I think in my life, there's so many times I could have got killed. So many times things couldn't have worked out. But it was wonderful. I mean, having good parents, being safe, even though the area that I was in the Bronx, there was, gang wars, there was people dying of heroin, getting killed. A lot of guys went to jail or died young. Thank God I stuck. I don't remember when I was young, I wanted to get a motorcycle jacket so I could look like all the other guys. My father says, no way getting you a motorcycle jacket. If you look like one of those gangsters, you're going to end up in jail. And a lot of the guys did. It was such a shame. Really nice people died and stuff. And I was a little younger than the group that got into the drugs, but it was all around us. It was so funny. When I was in high school, the school decided they need monitors in the hallway. So instead of using just regular kids, they hired gang members to be in the hallway. So we had the Golden Guineas, we had the Ford of Baldies, we had all these gang members in the hallway being hall monitors. We had all kinds of problems. We had guys that took toilet bowls out of the the boys' room, threw it out of the window into the central courtyard. And then we had the FBI come in and spray all the toilets with some kind of ultraviolet dye, and then examine your hands to see if you did it and all this stuff. I mean, man, it was really a wild time. But I got out of there. I survived that. I survived all the other stuff. Then when I went to City College, which is in the middle of Harlem, it was beautiful on the street that we went to, from the subway station, 145th Street, to 125th Street where the campus was. But if you went one block north or south of Amsterdam Avenue, which went right to the school, you were in the ghetto.
Yeah.
And it was bad. You had to be really careful and all this stuff. So it really, with all these blessings. And then my father was actually the one who encouraged me when I was in City College to apply for the Atomic Energy Fellowship, which I didn't even know anything about it. I never read the newspaper and stuff. I was going to think about going into maybe helicopters or something. I interviewed with Sikorsky. And anyway, I got the fellowship. It was like, wow, this is incredible. Then my father was the one who encouraged me to go with the boat design, with the dowel sticks to MIT, which has led to a whole career in this stuff.
Why did you choose MIT when you could go anywhere?
Because, the fellowship said I could go to anywhere, like 50 different colleges. I even could have went to the University of Hawaii. Yeah. I didn't even know where MIT was. I had always heard about it. I says, that's where I'm going to go. Wherever it is, I'm going. It was really interesting. When I went there the first day, I stayed in Graduate House. It was an old hotel in Cambridge, right on the Charles River. And my mother and I and my father walked into the thing, and in the courtyard of this hotel, which was the Graduate House, where they had all the rooms for the kids, there was somebody playing the bagpipe. He was walking around playing the bagpipe. It was really strange. But it was a wonderful time.
Why don't you talk about all the cars you've had and when you've traded them in for
okay. So
your first car.
All right. So what happened was when we got my wife and
What was the first car you drove?
I think it was a Valiant. Phyllis and I got married, and I had been always used to bicycling to the supermarket, bringing back food. When I got married, I got a bicycle for my wife. We had baskets, so we would bicycle back and forth. Then Phyllis got pregnant, and we were coming home one night carrying an ironing board and stuff on the bike. And she said to me, I want a car. So I said, okay. So Teresa, her sister, had been working for the phone company, and she said, okay, I can get you a car from the phone company. And we got a Valiant.
Mhm.
So we got that car, and then we were able to drive around. It was a nice
Yeah.
car. Oh no, what the heck happened? I'm not sure. No, we didn't get the Valiant first. We decided to buy a car, but we got a station wagon, a Ford
Okay.
station wagon, and it was very cheap. And we bought it, and we would drive around, but it had a lot of problems, like a leaking radiator. And when you turn the radio on, if you left it on loud, it would work. But when you turn the volume down, it wouldn't
Wouldn't work at all.
work at all.
Loud enough.
So you'd have to put it off the station a little bit to get
So
the
it
right
got the right
volume. And it was so much fun because I remember having Eva, who was Phyllis's aunt,
Yeah.
and her mother Florence, I don't know, some other people in the thing. And we're driving along, and all of a sudden, I had standard shift. It wasn't working anymore. So I looked underneath, and I said, oh, gee, there was like a linkage with a cotter pin that had broken.
Yeah.
So I went in to open the car up. I said, anybody got a hair curler? Oh, yeah. So they gave it to me. I bent the pyre, stuck it in, and off we went again. And then a father had another car, and he was always like, oh, I like your car. It's really nice. So when we got the Valiant from Teresa, we gave him the car. We put it for his birthday. It was for happy birthday. He didn't know what the heck to do with
Yeah.
it. He didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But that's the car that we used when we drove out to Chicago.
Okay.
Out
The
there.
Valiant.
Yeah, and then that's the one. It was so much fun. I mean, it was crazy life. We were there, and when the first apartment we got in Woodbridge, it was like, I don't know, Crescent Apartments or something, and we got 4 bedrooms, I think, and I got 1 bedroom just for my shop.
Mhm.
So I built my whole workbench, not the triangle, my
Yeah.
whole work. I had a saw that went back and forth along the length of the
Yeah.
thing. I built a big couch. I built all this
Yeah.
stuff and everything. And my wife said, we got to save money. So I said, okay. So the next year we moved into something called Prentice Creek, which was cheaper. And I took the workbench and I changed it into a bed for us. It was about 4 feet high off the ground or something, with all the structure underneath it. And I always remember I put Frankie up on top of the bed. You weren't born yet, and I was down at the bottom, and he was throwing pillows at me down on the bed, and I was throwing pillows back up, and he was wiping me out. It was a lot of fun, and I had my bike there from. It was a 3-speed. I made it into 15-speed when I was in the Bronx. I carried it all along. It was robbed once in when I was at MIT, and I found it, and I sawed through it, and I took it out, and I put it all. We brought it to Chicago, and then when we left Prentice Creek to go, when you were born,
Right.
we moved to a nice apartment, countryside, wherever it was. And so I left the bike there, and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
Didn't have it. And then when Frankie was born, and he was, or you were born, and Frankie was stuck home, and of course Nana was, Mom was home. I built Frankie this big structure where he
Jungle
could,
gym, right?
like a jungle gym. He could climb up this rope ladder. He had a swing. Had a big crane on the thing. He did all this stuff. He loved it. He had a great time.
So what car? When did you get the Volkswagen van?
So then what happened was, then when I finally got out of Chicago, there was Kevin and Michelle Carr that lived underneath this little apartment in the place, and he was a mechanic. So I just say, here, I'll sell it to you for $1, but it had a lot of problems. That car had to jiggle the key to get it in the lock.
Yeah.
It was one time I was driving to work, heard this tremendous explosion, and nothing stopped.
Stop working.
Nothing. So I kept driving. I looked at it, a big patch of the tire had blown out. I just left it.
It's
Spare parts, no problem. There was one time I was driving down there. It was like 15 degrees below zero for like weeks on end.
In Chicago.
In Chicago, and then I had to drive down this highway to Morris, Illinois, and there's like big snowstorms. I couldn't see where the highway was.
Yeah.
I was just guessing where it was, and I was driving on it anyway. Then we actually bought the first Toyota there.
Okay.
We had that Toyota.
Corolla,
I gave
right?
that to Toyota Corolla, and then I gave that car to Kevin, and then we took the Toyota back to Connecticut.
Yep. And when did you have the car that caught on fire?
Oh, okay. So then we had the Toyota, I'm trying to remember. Then from there we went to the Impala, and the
The
Impala.
red interior, red exterior.
Yeah, that was had the red outside. It was a V8, and I wanted to get the Monte Carlo because I was working on Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
My mom wanted the okay, Impala.
Now, why'd you pick the red interior and red exterior?
I don't know. She
Okay.
liked red. Mom
Hey.
always liked red.
Okay.
Anyway, so what happened was that was an interesting car. What happened was, at some point in its life, it sort of lost power. And we found out that the way they built it, they made a mistake in some of the construction of the engine. So one cylinder wasn't working. So instead of being a V8, it was a V7. So I says, fine, let it be a V7. And then it got rust on the floor, and it rusted through right above the catalytic converter, which is always hot.
Yeah.
So when you were driving, there was no sweat, it was nice and cool. But when you stopped, the dirt that fell on top of the catalytic converter made smoke come into the car.
Yeah.
So when I went to trade it in, I brought the Impala in, and the guy from the car place opened the door. He says, I'm not going in the car, that car's on fire.
And it had to get off the lot. Remember you like
Oh,
got,
that was different.
that was
Different. Anyways, eventually we got rid of it.
Yeah.
And then Mom wanted a VW van.
right.
So I said, okay, we'll get the VW van. So we got the VW, it was a blue one. And there was some rust problems with it, like in the beams underneath
Yeah,
the
don't
bottom.
get out of the seat.
And,
when
we
you-
had all kinds of problems. And then I rigged up something because the ignition wasn't working, so I put some wires, a switch on that, and once in a while things would burn out
Right.
and stuff. And then eventually the hole in the floor was so big you could watch the road going by.
Right,
underneath.
yeah.
And then I remember I was with Joey and Barney and Mom and me, and and I think the kids, you and Frankie, and we were going to a movie and stuff, and the regulator went. So either we could drive at night with the lights on, and the engine would stop, or we could turn the lights off, and the engine would run.
Yeah.
So we drove with no lights, and then when we saw a car coming, we had to turn the lights on. The engine would stop, it would be stuck. So then we'd open the side door, and then Joey and I, or Joey and Barney, would have Mom in the driver's seat and tell her to pop the clutch.
Yeah.
We'd push like crazy,
Yeah.
say, pop the clutch, she get the engine running, the lights would be out, we jump in through the side door, continue driving in the dark.
Till the next car.
Till the next car showed up. Then that car, I was trying, Mom wanted a Di Tommaso. It was a Chrysler Di Tommaso, a yellow like
Chrysler, what was it? Chrysler D2 Mazda?
It was designed by this guy Di Tommaso, which was like a designer.
Yeah.
And so she wanted one of those. So I said, okay, let's buy one of those. So we bought it. It was a piece of garbage. All the locks went on it. They
The
did
wheel?
it.
Did the wheel fall off?
The wheel came up, but that was probably my fault. I skidded one time and I bumped the wheel and the wheel fell off. Front wheel. So we didn't die or anything. It was okay. We got it fixed. But then I had to get rid of the VW van with the hole in it to get the Di Tommaso. And so I went into some places trying to trade it in. I remember I went to one place, and the guy looked at it and he said, "Oh, no," I said, "We don't want it." So I said, "Okay, fine." So I opened the driver's side door. I put my knee down. I pushed it with one foot so
Like a
I got to go
skateboard.
down a hill.
Yeah.
Jumped in, popped the clutch.
I'll take my business elsewhere. I'm going elsewhere in my business. Can you give me a push?
The Di Tommaso, we had a hell of a time selling that thing. I don't know what the heck we got after that. I don't remember anymore.
You got the Corolla, I think the gold Corolla. Remember or maybe the Honda Accord. Remember you had the gold Toyota or something like that. Remember?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah. And then you had the Chevy Blazer.
Yeah.
And then after the Blazer, then you were a truck guy. Because then
That
after
was
the
a truck
Blazer.
guy forever. I never wanted any
So then you had the Chevy Blazer, the two-tone light brown, dark brown.
Yeah, and the
And-
Blazer went out in flames.
Yeah, too.
Yeah, that's what's fun.
That's when you got that you wanted a country CD because you're figuring.
Oh yeah, country west off road.
Yeah. So you got
Oh.
was it Waylon Jennings?
Waylon
Jr.?
Jennings. I remember we were driving with the dog in the car, and we went through this access road over these bumps, playing this country western. Dog threw up.
Different.
Then we moved to when we moved to Virginia. We were coming back from Virginia. You were still up here somehow.
Yeah.
We come back from Virginia. We're on the highway, and the Blazer. I was very bad. I never changed the oil. I just would add oil to the engine. So eventually the engine blew out and they put another engine in. It cost a couple $1,000. And I was on it. And then I never fiddled around with the transmission or anything. We're driving back on the highway, like on 84 or something. I don't know. We're driving back. All of a sudden, the engine started losing power. So I kept giving it more gas. So then we started seeing smoke on the side of the car. And then I kept downshifting it, flooring the gas. I said, I'm not going to stop on the damn highway.
It's a dragster pull with the transmission.
I'm going to make it to exit.
Yeah.
So, billowing smoke and people are like, your car's on fire.
I
know, don't worry about it. We're all set.
Good, thank you.
So I pulled off and they got off a thing. We stopped at the gas station and the oil was dropping out of the transmission in little flames.
Flames. Oh.
And then we called you, you got us.
Yeah.
And then we had the car towed, and then Nicky went over and he took off the dolphin in the front and all the CDs and all the other stuff. He brought it all. I don't know how he
and then you got a green. What was that, Ford or the big green car? You get the big green truck. You got the turquoise.
Oh yeah. That was a Ford F-150.
Okay.
That was the first one. That one lasted a couple of 200,000 miles.
Yeah.
Then I got. Did I get a red one? I don't know.
Yeah, you got a red Ford F-150.
Ford F-150. And then only lasted 150,000 miles before the exhaust manifold went.
Everything was.
And then I got the Toyota Tundra, which I love.
You love that one.
I love it.
It's your
Still
favorite
love
car.
it. It was wonderful.
That one's only like 3 or 4 years old, right?
Yeah. I got it in 2011.
Yeah. How about talking about your mom? I know you and your mom had a real close relationship because she was real sick,
Yeah.
and your dad was gone all the time.
Yeah. What happened was my father was working on the railway mail when I was a boy, and so he'd be home for a week and away for a week, something like 8 days, 7 days, something like that. So I had to take care of my mom. I was like responsible for my mom. Actually, my mom had some problems, and I ended up having to take her to the hospital one time. My father was away, and thank God I did it. It probably saved her life. And then we're going along, and then eventually my father decided to retire early, and they were okay for like 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Then he started getting heart trouble,
Right.
and then he started he had to take warfarin for the blood
Yeah.
thinner. Then we brought him up. It was actually Mom's idea to rescue him from the Bronx, because there was still drug wars and people shooting on Friday night and all this stuff. So Mom and I rented a van. That was her idea, thank God. We came down one Friday night. We said, okay, we're taking you out of here. Put all your important stuff in a bag. We took some garbage bags, all this stuff. Threw it in with them.
Yeah.
My father had been having trouble being constipated and stuff. And he used to go to the Montefiore Hospital, which was a disaster. They'd leave you in the hallway for 8 hours.
It
was terrible.
Yeah.
I came down a couple of times.
Yeah.
Eventually, Mom was so good. She says, let's bring him up. So we brought him up to our place. We found an apartment for them, like a few miles away. Then he developed Parkinson's. He kept falling.
Yeah.
And then that's the time I was trying to help him, but still keep him independent. Also, my mother was incapacitated then because she had fallen down and she was bedridden.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, how can I keep him stable without falling down? So I went to Home Depot. I got all these extendable poles. I fixed them up, and I put all these poles inside the apartment so he could go from pole to pole without falling down. That worked for about a year or so. There must be people coming in seeing all those poles. But it worked. It worked good. Then my mother got a urinary infection. She went to the hospital. My father just went downhill after that. And so I had to put her in the nursing home.
Yeah.
And then as soon as she went in the nursing home, my father collapsed and stuff. And I had him over our house for like a week or so. And then I had to go down to Baltimore. And he was getting feisty, I would try to help him, he'd be pushing me and pushing around. So I said, okay, we're going to put you with Mom in the nursing home for a couple of days. He never came out. So what happened there was they, I think, had trouble with him. And they kept him sedated, because when I saw him, he was eating, but he was out of it. I had him in the same room as my mother. He didn't really care. He had all these delusions and stuff. And eventually, he only lasted a few months, then he got pneumonia and died while I was on travel.
Right. All right, how about dancing? How has dancing affected your life? Like all the competitions you and Mom won, and your mom used to dance, right?
Yeah. Mom loved dancing.
Your mom loved dancing too.
My mother loved dancing.
Did she dance when you were a kid? Did she used to dance?
Yeah, I don't remember her going to dance with my father. I don't think he liked dancing. But we used to dance at weddings and stuff.
Yeah.
I would dance, but it was really nice.
Yeah.
And then let's see. I'm trying to think.
You and Mom won a competition, didn't you?
Yeah. So when I was at Combustion Engineering, one of the guys decided to have a dance party from the 60s or something.
Yeah.
And he invited all the people to come to his house. And I told Mom, before I went in there, I said, "We're winning this contest." Okay. So I got a pack of cigarettes, I rolled it up in my sleeve, and I took her out there and I danced up a storm. Damn it, we won!
You got a record or
I
something?
got a record, yeah, a long playing record. I'm just determined, damn it, I'm gonna win this.
I'm gonna win this record.
But Mom's always been Mom and Barney, when they dance, is perfect. With me,
Yeah.
I'm a little awkward,
Yeah.
and,
Oh, you're
but
right.
I love it. They one time used to call me the dancer.
The
Because
dance.
I used to dance wild at all these
Yeah.
weddings and stuff. A lot of times I dance so wild, Mom would walk off the floor.
Leave you alone. Leave you finish.
Yeah, I'm so crazy, but I still love dancing with
Yeah.
Mom. Every time we go, I keep wishing somebody else would get married so we go dancing again.
Yeah.
We went dancing one time in a local club, and it was really funny. This guy came in. This was like a year or two ago. This guy came in dressed like Elvis. He had long sideburns. He must have been about 55 years old. And the whole outfit, the
Yeah.
hot collar, and all
Yeah.
this stuff. But I guess everybody's different.
Yeah,
So, okay, so that's the way it is,
Cool.
So.
Well, do you have anything else you think of?
No, I probably missed a bunch of stuff.
Good thing
But
about
Mom
it.
did really well in school. She got a master's at UMass Amherst.
Yeah.
She got a job at Travelers initially, which was a really good job. And then she worked at, I think, Aetna for a while. And then she went to Virginia, and she worked for Bell Atlantic, and then she worked for she worked for Bell Atlantic for a while. Then when we came up here, she got a job offer in Fidelity, and
Yeah.
she worked there for a number of years. And she got tired of the corporate. She really did a lot of wonderful things.
Right.
But the politics in the organization is terrible, so she went into consulting.
Yeah.
And so she worked at a couple places. Every place they loved her. Matter of fact, the last place she worked before she got this job at E=MC, she was working for a government-related project, WIC, Women
Yep.
and Children
Yeah.
or something. And they loved her so much that even though she's been gone for a year, they're talking about offering her a job
That's great.
again back there in
That's
Boston.
great.
The only trouble is the commute.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Cool.
But it's been a wild ride.
You had a long, fun life.
Yeah.
Alright, well, I'll stop.
All right.
Let me stop the video now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. You want me to go or you want to stay here?
I'll say here. Just one
Okay,
more.
hold on a second. Alright, go ahead.
Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. When we built the first big boat, Tridactyl 1, one of the problems we made setting this thing up at Barn Island in Rhode Island was that we forgot a rope to go to the top of the mast. And Frankie volunteered to get hoisted up to the top of the 35-foot mast.
On the water.
No, he was on the land,
dock,
and I
okay.
got pictures of it. This whole my
Yeah.
videos. And stuff. But he volunteered. He did a great job, and that was good. And then Frankie was again influential because when I was working on the Tridactyl 3, I says, the way this design is such that it would be really useful with this big kind of spider structure with the 3 hulls and elevated space frame and stuff. You actually could sail over a dock and pick up cargo containers
Right.
for islands that didn't have like a deep water port.
Right.
And you could pick them up and put them down and all that stuff. But it could take 3 or 4 or something like
Mm.
that. So I was talking to Frankie about it, and he said, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't you get rid of the 3 hulls and make 3 cargo ships on one of each of the 3 corners of
Yeah.
this thing? So I said, well, I'll think about it. So I started thinking about it, did some calculations. Turned out you needed beams like 3,000 feet long.
Yeah.
And I did some calculations, a 20-foot diameter beam with a 1 foot wall thickness.
Oh my goodness.
The thing would sag, if you didn't consider yielding or anything, it
Right.
would sag about 30, 40 feet in the middle. It was just impractical.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so instead of trying to do 3, why don't we just do 1?
Yeah.
So that's the concept we've been working on. We
Yeah.
have 1, the thing comes up to it, hooks up to it, does all
Yeah.
stuff. So that's where so I have to give him credit for that idea.
Yeah.
It was a good idea. And then, of course, Nikki was wonderful for all my drawings and all my patents and all the patience of changing the design. And now I have like
Wow.
4 patents under my belt for the boat and one in the oven, as they say.
One of the
And it's been a wonderful life. I love my wife more and more every day, and she looks fantastic. She's just a real loving woman, and we're working with this new group for weight stuff. She's counseling other people. She's talking to all these other people. She's helping other people in their battle to conquer, weight gain and all this stuff. And it's just fantastic, and I'm so happy for her. And I love her like crazy. Okay.
All right.
That's it.
That's the end. Today is July 3rd, 2015.
Yeah.
All right. Over and out.
Yeah.